Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Saturdays Are for the Byzantines podcast. My name is Professor Wren. I am your host. Disclaimer, not really a professor, don't really have a PhD, don't work at any university. Okay, got that out of the way fairly quick. And if you have found this video, please make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and then hit the notification bell so you never miss another episode. We are also on Apple Podcasts and Google Play. So if you're listening there, please do give us a follow. And if you're listening on iTunes, please make sure to give a 5-star review. It really helps. Also leave a comment on the YouTube video. Definitely helps with the algorithms, especially if you have questions about anything I talked about. I'd be more than happy to answer questions in the comment section. And I think hopefully in the future, as I hope more people start watching and leave comments, we can start, at the start of episodes that I can answer a question or two from the comment section. I think that'll be a fun way to interact with the audience here. So today we're doing one of our short midweek videos. This is a topic which, I might not get to cover in as much detail as I would like during the big weekend lecture. And so I take some of these topics and mix them in shorter videos throughout the week. We'll be doing, anywhere one, maybe as many as 3 of these per week. Just depends on how my schedule shakes out. And so today I wanted to talk about Saint Leo the Great, or Pope Leo the Great, the Pope who met with Attila and seems to maybe have caused him to turn his army around and not sack Rome. So I want to take a closer look at who he was. So Pope Leo was born in 400 AD in Tuscany, so he's an Italian. And then he becomes Pope in 440 AD, so about the age of 40, which is kind of young. Perhaps not as much for the time, but certainly thinking about it today, if we had a 40-year-old who became Pope, that would be like, wow, is a real spring chicken. And then he dies on November 10th in 461 AD. So he's 61 years old. Easy to keep track of his age because he's born in 400. So dies at the age of 61. Saint Leo comes from an aristocratic family. So this is fairly common that we see with the famous churchmen from this time period, is that they come from, fairly well-off backgrounds, which again indicates that Christianity was pretty well established among the Roman nobility at this point in time. Interesting thing about Saint Leo is that he did not have a secular career before entering the priesthood. A number of the churchmen and saints who we've talked about already on this show, Saint Jerome, Saint Augustine, the Cappadocian Fathers. Later on, we'll talk about Saint John of Damascus, and he'll be the same way. All of those guys had some sort of secular career before they became churchmen, before they became priests. That is not the case with Leo. He went directly into the clergy and became a deacon. All those other guys had other jobs. They were civil servants, things like that, before they entered the priesthood. Pope Leo, or Saint Leo, either way, is a doctor of the church. He wrote a work called the Tome, which was presented at the Second Council of Ephesus, which reiterated Catholic theology on Christology, particularly because there's a lot of Christological heresies at this point in time, and all a Christological heresy is just a heresy about the nature of Christ, right? Christological, regarding Jesus Christ. And so Leo's tome is emphasizing that Jesus was both fully God and fully man, had 2 natures, one human, one divine, as well as his status as the second person of the Trinity, God the Son, one of the 3 co-equal members of the Trinity, no one person in the Trinity being greater than the others. That's God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. And so that's that, among other writings, is why he is a doctor, why Pope Leo, Saint Leo, is considered a doctor of the church. He also oversaw the Council of Chalcedon or Chalcedon, depending on how you like to say it. I've heard it both. It seems to me that if you learned Latin with a more classical approach, indicating the classical accent, like if you say Weni Witty Wiki instead of Veni Vidi Vici, you tend to say Chalcedon. But if you have more of a church Latin background, you are more inclined to say Chalcedon, right? Someone who does ecclesiastical church Latin says Veni Vidi Vici, which I ascribe to. My father does the classical pronunciation, which always I think it sounds very weird. I understand that that's what how Latin was spoken by the Romans, but I think that the church saved Latin from itself because it made it sound far better with the whole V's like U's and or W's and with all the hard K's or hard C's making the K sound. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. Another interesting thing I found as I was looking through information about Pope Leo, or I should say Saint Leo, because there's 13 Pope Leos. Got to narrow it down a bit. The one thing I thought was interesting about Saint Leo the Great was he attempted to unify Christendom under the Roman discipline. Now, when I talk about this, there's you often hear people talk about there's both dogma and discipline, and so dogma is kind of like what you believe as a Catholic. Yeah, there's the teachings of the apostolic teachings of the Church, which have been passed down for 2,000 years. But then discipline is something different. Discipline is sort of how you practice your beliefs, and dogma does not change. Dogma has remained the same. Sometimes it needs clarification, but it has remained the same for 2,000 years of Catholic history. However, discipline is a different story, right? Disciplines can change. So for one example might be, not eating meat on Friday is a discipline. It's not a dogma. You don't necessarily have to not eat meat on Fridays, but you would have to replace that with some other form of penance, some other sacrifice. Like for example, there are a lot of people these days people with autoimmune disorders who find that a carnivore diet helps with their autoimmune issues. And so it would be reasonable to say to those kinds of people, we can't really ask you to deviate from that diet because it's not good for your health. So you ought to find some other form of penance or sacrifice to do on Fridays in Lent. Maybe it's going to confession. Maybe there's something else you like that you give up on Fridays, something along those lines. But that would be an example of the difference between dogma and discipline. And so what Saint Leo tries to do is he tries to unify Christians from a non-Roman tradition and get them to practice the Roman tradition, the Roman discipline. And one example of this was he was talking to the patriarch, I believe it was the patriarch of Alexandria, because it would have been because it was Egypt. And it wasn't Cyril of Alexandria. It was the guy who followed him. His name escapes me at the moment. It's not really important, but he was talking to him and trying to convince the Egyptian patriarch out of Alexandria to adopt more of the Roman practices as opposed to the traditional Egyptian Coptic practices. One that I remember reading about was he wanted the Egyptians to practice a more Roman form of baptism. And this may have also included adopting more of the Roman liturgy, right? There's a Coptic liturgy, and then there's a Roman liturgy. That would be the Latin Mass, essentially. And both forms of both the Coptic liturgy and the Latin liturgy are both valid. Obviously, they're both good. There's nothing wrong with attending either one of them. But Leo wanted to try to unify Christians under one tradition, which I thought was interesting. Now, obviously, the most notable thing that Leo did during his lifetime was the meeting with Attila. Now, we talked about this in a good amount of detail in our last episode, Barbarian Invasion, the Huns, episode, I believe it's episode 3 of our barbarian invasion kind of mini-series in there. So you can go back and watch that video, get a whole lot of detail about the Huns. I think if you enjoy this video, I definitely recommend going checking that out. You probably enjoy it as well. But so just for if you did not see that video, what happened was Attila leads a campaign in Roman Italy in 452. And he sacks a number of cities in northern Italy. He sacks Aquileia, Padua, Milan, Verona, I believe. I was thinking, what was the city where Romeo and Juliet is? It's Verona. It escaped my mind there for a second. But anyway, so Attila's on this rampage in Italy, cutting through the Italian countryside like a hot knife through butter. And then he's marching on Rome. And the people in Rome, in an act of desperate, because Rome was just sacked in 410, and it's been about 40 years since then. So Leo, with his papal entourage, goes out to meet with Attila in an attempt to dissuade Attila from attacking and sacking the city of Rome. Now, nothing that was said at this meeting between Attila and St. Leo is recorded. We really don't know what Leo said to Attila and what Attila said in response. But we do know for sure that the meeting occurred, and that Attila, after the meeting, turned around and ceased his march on Rome. Now, the ancient sources on this is interesting. There's two ancient sources that I could find that mention this meeting, and they both credit Leo with, for one reason or another, causing Attila to turn around. You have Prosper of Aquitaine, who credits Leo he says that Leo impressed Attila so much that Attila found him, I guess, so magnanimous and impressive that he turned his army around and started marching away from Rome. And then Priscus as well. Priscus is a bit more distant from this meeting. He would not have been in the camp where it occurred. Priscus was, I don't think I've mentioned him on this podcast before, but Priscus was an Eastern Roman diplomat who he was sent to negotiate with Huns a number of times. And he's mentioned a lot in Peter Heather's book, which I've referenced a number of times on the show. It's a really good book. You should go check it out. But so those are two fairly notable ancient sources, which both credit Attila with, both credit Leo with having a good deal of impact on Attila's decision not to move on Rome. The medieval sources also tend to credit Leo as well. However, they're fairly far removed, and they're looking back on the ancient source. So I'm more concerned with what the ancient sources have to say. Now, modern scholars tend to have more doubt about this. I was reading a quote. I can't remember. I want to say the guy's last name was Morgan, but I'm not sure. He said, Attila was basically a heathen. Why would he listen to a Catholic pope's theological reasons for why Attila should not attack Rome? I think this line of reasoning here is, I think it's selling Leo short. So the reason I say this is because we don't know what was said at the meeting. It kind of does, it leaves you with the possibility of, well, maybe Leo didn't just come in and say to Attila, well, God is going to smite you if you sack Rome, right? I think that assuming that he just said that really sells him short. I mean, obviously Leo was a very competent guy. He did become the Pope. He is a doctor of the church. Clearly, he has a high degree of competency. And I don't believe for a minute that he only had one line of argument for Attila. I mean, I'm sure this was do or die for anybody who lived in Rome. The Huns were not going to be as nice about their sack of Rome as the Visigoths were in 410. The Huns are not Christians, right? Even though the Visigoths are Arian Christians, they do show mercy to, for example, people who take refuge, who take sanctuary in Catholic churches, even if they're pagans. That's something that St. Augustine talks about. And if you want to hear more about that, you can go back and listen to our episode on St. Augustine. That's another good episode, another little short lecture. So this is your Leo and his papal entourage. Their back is really up against the wall here. So I have a feeling that they had probably a number of lines of argument that they could use to Attila, not just making the religious appeal. For example, I was talking to my dad about this yesterday. My dad's a historian, and he brought up this point, and I think it's certainly plausible that maybe Leo said to Attila, we were just sacked in 410, and as I mentioned in one of our recent episodes, Rome and its surrounding countryside was producing 1/7 the revenue, even a decade after the 410 sack of Rome, that they were producing beforehand. They were producing 1/7 the revenue that they were before the 410 sack, and that's a decade later. So even if, let's just say it got up to a quarter of the revenue that they were producing beforehand, that's still not a whole lot. Attila is probably expecting a lot more to be there than 1/4 of the revenue, 1/4 of the money that they would have gotten had they come down and sacked Rome half a century ago, or well more like 40 years ago. So I think that's possible. And then you as well point out to Attila that your army is suffering from the plague, and the Eastern Romans, Aetius is out there somewhere, and he seems like he's launching raids into the Hunnic Empire. And if Attila gets bogged down sacking Rome, and the Eastern Romans send a force down into Italy, well, then he's really trapped, right? He's got, the only place he can go is south, and he can only run so far before he has to have a big confrontation. And the last time the Huns had a big confrontation with the Romans, they end up losing. It's close, and the Romans, you could argue, it's a pure victory, but they do lose. And again, if he's stuck down in the boot of Italy, he's got nowhere to run. It's not like what happened after Chalon, where he was able to flee back to the Hunnic Empire. So obviously, you do, like I said, the lack of information does allow you to kind of say, well, maybe this happened, maybe that happened, maybe he said this, maybe Attila reacted this way. There was apparently as well some I can't remember exactly where I read this, but there was apparently a little bit of superstition, which is not shocking. A lot of people back at this time period do have certain superstitions, but there may have been a bit of superstition on Attila's part that Alaric, after he sacks Rome in 410, dies fairly soon after. And perhaps Attila was afraid that if he sacked Rome, he would have a similar fate to Alaric, dying fairly soon after that. So my real case here is that a lot of the modern scholarship, which really, you might say, well, you don't have a PhD, you haven't researched this, you can't talk about this. Well, if you don't like that, then don't watch. Okay, everyone, people are allowed. I've read over this. I'm thinking about this. I'm discussing it with a real professional historian. If you don't like that I don't have a PhD, you can invite me to your university, and I'd be more than happy to start working on one. Not that I really expect to get any comments, but I'm anticipating possible criticisms here. But what I really do think is they're selling Leo short on how he could have potentially approached this meeting with Attila in order to save really to save the city, because he lives in Rome. But I think I've made my point there. And then one last thing about Saint Leo as well is that he also has another meeting with the famous barbarian leader who was Gaiseric. We talked about that in the Vandal episode. That's part 2 of our barbarian invasion kind of mini series. And if you want to go check that out, I'd highly recommend it. It's another really good lecture we've got up on the channel, the Professor Wren YouTube channel. Please make sure to leave a like if you've made it this far in the video. But so Leo is still Pope in 455, and he goes out to meet Geiseric, who again was the Vandal king, basically, and he Geiseric was on the move to sack Rome, and again, although the Vandals are Christian, they are not Catholic Christians; they're Arian Christians, but they do recognize the common religion with Romans, and they do agree to basically take the stuff and leave the people alone. You know, if people are hiding in a church, allow them to have the sanctuary in the church. And the sack of 455 is not quite nearly as bad as it really could have been. So you have Pope Leo, or Pope Saint Leo, really, having two famous leaders with two very notable barbarian leaders, and really pulling the Roman fat out of the fire twice, both times. But so that's all I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed this mini little lecture video that we're putting out again a couple times midweek to kind of break up the longer weekend lectures. So if you made it this far in the video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a comment if you want to comment on anything, or if you have a question. Make sure to hit the notification bell so that you never miss another episode. As well, make sure to, if you're listening on Google Play or Apple Podcast, give us a follow. And if you're listening on Apple Podcast, please make sure to leave a 5-star review. That really helps. We have an Instagram page. You can go follow our Instagram page at academics_95. That's spelled ACADEMIX_95, where I post updates on the show and other interesting things about history that I like and hopefully you guys like as well. So with all that being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.